Hello, today I want to show you one very interesting game between two of the current top players in the world, Levon Aronian and Viswanathan Anand. This game was played back in 2013, and with black was Viswanathan Anand. So the opening is d4, d5, c4, and now Anand goes for the Slav defense. Slav defense is one of the most complicated openings, unless, of course, white simply wants to play for a draw and takes c takes d5. In this case, this exchange Slav is actually a little bit boring. But fortunately, Aronian was fighting here to win the game, so he went one of the main moves, knight f3, knight f6, now knight c3, and black goes e6. So this is some kind of semi-Slav defense, and now it's possible to go both queen's gambit. If white takes on d5, black can take with the e pawn, or he can take with the c pawn. But in this case, he has to take with the e pawn in order to open up his diagonal. Otherwise, this deviation of the Slav defense, where black is playing e6, is a little bit more passive, because usually you want to meet let's say this line pawn takes, knight c3. First of all, you play knight c6, and then, of course, you should not play e6, but after bishop f5, the bishop is out of the pawn chain. So now white has two main possibilities. He can play, of course, bishop g5, after which black also has a choice. He can go to the Botvinnik line with pawn takes c4, or he can play first h6 or bishop e7 or knight d7 to transpose to some of the lines in the queen's gambit. And the other line for white is to protect his pawn with the move e3. Seems a bit more maybe modest, because it's closing down the dark square bishop, but the idea usually is to play bishop to d3 and then to prepare e4 next. Now black has to play knight d7. This is the best move. Basically, black is waiting until white moves the bishop, so he's not taking immediately. He wants white to lose one tempo, to play the bishop to e2 or d3, and then to take on c4 and to push b5 for the tempo to play some of these very famous Meran lines. And white has to move the bishop, because c takes now is very bad when the bishop is closed, and the other possibility is to play b3, bishop b2, but this is as well not so active. The bishop on b2 is not very active on this diagonal, especially with the knight on c3. Maybe if the knight is on d2, it makes some sense to play b3, bishop b2, but with the knight on c3, usually this is not a good idea. So he goes bishop to d3. Now black takes, and of course this is still a theoretical line, b5. Now white can play the bishop back to b3, to d3, to e2. All of this has been tried in hundreds and maybe thousands of games. Bishop d3 was the answer of Levon Aronian. Now as well, black has many possibilities. Bishop b7, a6. He went bishop d6, which of course has the idea to castle very quickly, and sometimes maybe to prepare move like e5. Especially if white plays e4, then the only move for black will be e5. Otherwise, of course, white have e4, e5, the fork. Now white goes castle, black castles as well, and he goes queen c2. Again, oh, this is of course a fury. Both players are prepared very well. Bishop to b7 was the move of Anand. And now there are few possibilities. White can of course play e4, but also he can play the move a3. a3 makes some sense to prevent the move b4, because now if you push b4, white will take, and he will have open a file, and then Also, the pawn structure of black will be not so good with the weak pawn on c6 and weak pawn on a7. That's why Anand goes rook c8. And now sometimes he wants to play c5. So his rook has to be on the c file to put some pressure on the knight and the queen. And here now this is also very important. Generally, white will be quite happy if he can play himself a move like b4. This is actually one of the theoretical lines. But now usually black goes a5. And white cannot hold, or at least it will be very difficult to hold the pawn on b4. Because ideally, the pawns on b4 and d4, they are not allowing black to push c5. And therefore the bishop on b7 is very passive. So he can try now something like rook b1, and then if black takes and plays queen e7, maybe white can play the queen to b3, but in this case black will push e5. So eventually here I think we'll manage to free up this bishop, because after e5, if you take at some moment with the d pawn, then c5 is becoming a possibility. Of course, Aronian is very well prepared here, and he chose another line, which is the move knight to g5. And this is one of the most exciting lines. Now, what is the idea of the move knight g5? For example, if black plays h6, in order to protect his pawn, white wants to play, of course, knight e4. And then he wants to have better control on this square c5. And now if you take on e4, this will be a mistake, because after knight takes, you have to move the bishop. And finally, white will be able to play b4 without any possibilities for black to get some counterplay, because after a5, first of all, he can develop with bishop d2 and defend the pawn. Second, he can simply play knight c5. In both cases, the biggest problem of black is the bishop on b7. That's why after knight g5, black has to play something else. There are some very exciting lines in which black can take on h2. Now, the idea is that if white takes, there is knight g4 check. And after king to g1, black can take the knight. So he is with the pawn up. Of course, white can also take on h7 and then to go back. But white can play as well something like f3. Probably this is the best move. Otherwise, in many occasions, queen h4 checkmate is coming. So now black has to move the knight, but not knight e3, because then after queen e2, black is losing the knight. So black has to play knight f6, and after e4, let's say queen to h4, bishop to e3, or queen f2, white has good compensation for the pawn, because he has a nice center, he has paired bishops, and again the bishop on b7 is not so active. So those were a few of the possibilities after knight g5, but Anand has played a very interesting move, which is the move c5. At the time when this game was played, I think there was only one game with the move c5, which was played the previous year. And there have been a few games which has been played the same year, 2013. So this move was relatively new, and it's not clear exactly if Lev Aronian had prepared it very well. Now he can take the pawn on h7, both with his bishop or with his knight. Of course, in case the bishop h7, black should not take with a knight, because queen h7 mate, but has to play king h8. And this is one of the possible moves. Aronian decided to take with the knight. And here the thing is that if black takes, bishop takes, and king h8, after bishop to e4, black don't have any compensation, he's simply pawn down. So there has to be something else, but what exactly? Probably black can try a few things. He can play the move c4, and now I think white has to take, black has to take with the knight, and after bishop e2, black has some activity, but it's not very clear, is it enough? But Anand has prepared something very special. He went here knight to g4. And there has been, like I said, a few other games in which white has played the move h3. Probably this is the most natural move. But now after bishop h2, check, king h1, black has to play queen h4, and he wants to take on h3 with his queen, because now the bishop is pinning the pawn. And the lines are extremely sharp, and there are many complications. Because, for example, now white can try a move like pawn to d5, and he has plenty other possibilities. So I think Anand has to prepare this very well. The line is a little bit risky for both. But Aronian has decided to play a move which also looks interesting. This is the move f4 immediately, which was a novelty at the time. And now what to do after f4? Actually, black as well can play the move queen h4, but the difference is that after h3, now in the other line, the bishop was on h2 and the king on h1, and there was this idea queen h3. But now black doesn't have this idea. That's why he has to find something else, and this is the move which Anand has made, pawn takes. There is no time to take the rook, because, okay, actually white can take the rook, but now after bishop f8 or even king f8, black certainly has a good compensation. Now the idea is to meet pawn takes with knight df6, and queen d4 is coming. I don't think white can protect his pawn. So after queen d4, the black attack is very strong. Aronian took on d4, decided not to take the rook. And the game now is very complicated. Black has many possibilities like queen b6 or queen h4. But this was still part of the preparation, of course, of Anand. And here he has played this incredible move, which I think for Levon Aronian was a big shock. This was the move bishop to c5. And probably here, somewhere, Aronian understood that, oh, this is a home preparation. And now Anand probably knows everything until the end. So this is very unpleasant to play in such a situations where you know that your opponent has analyzed everything with his engine, especially if he's such a great player like Anand. And the point is that now if white takes, black takes with his knight, now the bishop is under attack. But if you move the bishop, let's say, back to e2, then the idea is to play queen d4 check. The only move is king h1, and now knight f2. Of course, you know about this smaller checkmate, I guess, but it would be very nice to show this idea again, queen g1, and then knight f2 checkmate. So that's why after knight f2, white has to take, but after queen f2, because his queen is hanging, he cannot move the bishop to f3. Also, of course, there is queen f1 checkmate, and here white is simply checkmate. He cannot defend both g2 and f1. Probably he can still take and then to play something like maybe queen e2 to give the bishop, but black has a very good game. And Aronian decided not to go into the main lines of his opponent, and he has played the move bishop to e2, which turned out to be not so good, but again it was a bit difficult to predict the next move of black, because if black plays some normal move like bishop takes and then king h1, now the knight is under attack, and maybe the best thing which black can do is to play knight f6, but this would allow white to exchange his knight, and now yes, black has, of course, activity, but white can try to develop his pieces. Bishop d2, bishop f3, and there is a long game ahead. But surprisingly, for Aronian, of course, Anand has made the move knight d to e5. And this is incredible move. The idea is that now black wants to protect his knight without allowing white to exchange on f6. And now what to do? If you take on c5, again we have the same checkmate with queen d4 and knight f2. So what else he can do? The only thing is to take the knight, which he did. Now first black takes on d4 with check, king h1, knight g4. So this is very difficult now for white. Probably he could have played knight g5, threatening queen h7 mate, but after f5, again black has probably winning position now. Rook f6 is coming and rook h6. It is very difficult to defend the h-pawn. Aronian took the rook, and here again the next move is extremely strong. Instead of taking the knight, which also is possible, like king f8, here Anand has played the move f5, just ignoring this knight, and he wants to bring his queen to h4. But not immediately queen h4, because surprisingly, it seems like this is a checkmate, because there is no h3 because of queen h3, but there is queen h7 check. That's why black is playing f5, and now he wants to play queen to h4. The only defense is knight to g6, and now temporarily black is with the rook down, but after queen f6 he wants to take the knight and to go queen h5, and there is no defense. White went h3, now black took the knight. Oh, he's already only an exchange down, and white cannot take the knight because of this checkmate. So he went queen e2, trying to bring the queen closer to the king side. But after queen h5, the problem is that black wants to take on h3. And maybe the best move was here rook f3. This was possible for white to play this move. Now black has many options, like bishop takes or even knight f2. Let's say he can take here, and now to play knight f2, because now after king h2, okay, this endgame, although it seems like equal, actually after knight d3, black is totally winning. Here he'll take all those pawns, and he has better pawn structure, but of course the game would continue longer. In the game, Aronian went queen d3, trying to protect this pawn, and now after knight f2 he would have sacrificed rook f2. But Anand has found again a very nice move, bishop to e3, and this was the end of the game here for Aronian, because now he resigned. Queen h3 is inevitable. If you take on e3, there is queen h3 and queen g2 checkmate. So this is one of the best games probably of Vishy Anand, and against a very, very good opponent like Levon Aronian, who in this moment had over 2800. So I hope that you have enjoyed this game, and see you next time.